I would like to play a clip of the Unrefined podcast, and let's listen to them talk about Richard Wallace and his observations on Lewis Carroll as a Jack the Ripper suspect.
In 1996, author Richard Wallace put out a book called Jack the Ripper, Light-Hearted Friend. And in that book, Wallace proposes his theory that Lewis Carroll could have been Jack the Ripper all along. Carroll was known to be a pretty gentle person, as well as a teacher. He taught math at Oxford until the day that he died in 1898. Wallace himself is kind of like a Carroll fan, a Carroll expert. They call him a Carroll scholar. He comes up with his own theory. He claims that Carroll had a nervous breakdown and in fact had a separate persona. And that separate persona is Jack the Ripper. The book that he wrote, again, it's called Jack the Ripper, Lighthearted Friend. It came out in 96. You can get it right now. You can find it on Amazon and stuff like that. But that book suggests that this psychotic break that he had came from years of abuse that Carroll took from older boys when he was in school, and it damaged him enough. So naturally, what does he do? Takes out his vengeance on prostitutes. But it wouldn't be too shocking if he was taking it out on prostitutes. One, it's an easy target. They're soliciting you, they're coming up to you, and they're bringing you places and everything like that. So you could easily target them and take advantage of them. Also, he was a lifelong bachelor, so it wouldn't be too out of the ordinary that he may be looking for a lady of the night. But the bigger question is he Jack the Ripper? Is Lewis Carroll Jack the Ripper?
Where's the evidence? I want to see it. Lay it on me.
Carroll was pretty famous for his anagrams and wordplay in his books. Anybody who's read any of the Lewis Carroll stuff can tell you that. Wallace's theory is mostly based on these anagrams and wordplay. He says that Carroll has hidden messages in his works that prove that he is Jack the Ripper. This is a passage from the book, and he just basically rearranges all the letters and makes new words from this one passage. It says, if I find one street whore, you know what will happen. 'Twill be off with her head. It's pretty interesting. Subscribe to Unrefined.
And one more time, those were the words of the Unrefined podcast, and you can get them on YouTube simply under the name Unrefined. But what do we make of some of these things? Here on Black Box Online Radio, I like to try and weigh the merit of the ideas. And one thing that was posted in the comments section, I know, great place to get your research right, but one thing that was posted was, some people were saying that they didn't think that Lewis Carroll lived close enough to Whitechapel to commit these murders, because they believed that Jack the Ripper was a Whitechapel resident. And I absolutely disagree with this type of thinking. And to be clear, this is not something that was stated from the Unrefined podcast. This was a commenter who responded to them. But you heard them talking about how he is in different parts of England. And I just don't particularly like that narrative. Yes, it's physically possible to go from one part of England to the next. And bear in mind there are significant time gaps between the activities of Jack the Ripper. Okay, so those are some things. And the next point would be that they are sharing this observation from Richard Wallace that Lewis Carroll would have experienced a mental breakdown, and you heard that that was done during his school years. But as I said at the beginning of the recording, Lewis Carroll would have been 56 years old at the time of the Whitechapel murders. Well, some of them anyway. The Whitechapel murders went into the 1890s, but I digress from that. But how would that work if he experienced a mental breakdown during his school years, and he's 56 at the time of Jack the Ripper's creation? What's going on there? What I believe is, and if I understand what Richard Wallace is trying to say, is that he would have created Jack the Ripper as an alter ego. And I think a very good example of this is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I was talking about this on the Tuesday show. Every Tuesday I do a segment called True Crime Talk Radio in the morning. And on the most recent one, I was responding to the documentary The Making of a Serial Killer. And they just flat out said it. Some serial killers like to go between personas. They go between different characters and parts that they are playing. And it's like a game to them in some ways. But I don't think that Richard Wallace was presenting it that way. I think he was presenting it as a way in looking at how Lewis Carroll, whose name was actually Charles Dodgson, was somebody who would create these different aspects of his personality as a way to deal with internalized ill feelings and rage. And that Jack is the one who handles all of the rage, and then Lewis is the one who handles the man of letters stuff, and he can be Charles in his day-to-day life. And I think that that's perhaps a fair assessment of it. So it's something that he would have carried for the rest of his life. His dark side would simply be named Jack the Ripper, or his dark side would simply be named Jack. That's I think, a way we can call it. So this is something that isn't completely unheard of. There are lots of other serial killers that would experience something like that. And also about experiencing abuse during his school years and carrying it on into his adulthood. The serial killer Joel Rifkin said some things that were really quite similar, that it wasn't so much abuse from his household that drove him to kill, but rather it was the experiences that he had being bullied by schoolmates, or by it's hard to call them mates at all, by being bullied by people at school, which would have driven him to commit these types of crimes. All right,